was I thought it was interesting almost watching rubbernecking Warriors fans in this game go through the process of acceptance of Chris Paul, where it was like so much time has been spent just yelling at this guy and the vitriol probably being spewed at this guy. And then there was almost like a point of acceptance along the around the time where he was running the second unit and getting some of the younger guys involved. And then at the end kind of fell flat. Where are you personally on Chris Paul experience after this first game?
I don't think he had a great night shooting. It's not that I don't think. We know he didn't have a great night shooting, but if you're a Warriors fans and the people who were sober about this deal and why they liked it, it's that he just made sense for making the bench unit functional. This might be the first, as bad as it was at times, personally for Paul, I think this bench unit makes sense in a way that I can't remember the last time Golden State had a functional bench. I really don't know. I'm talking about 6 years, 7 years of whenever Steph's not in there, it's absolute unmitigated disaster for the bench unit. And I think last night was proof of concept. Chris Paul just makes sense, man. Just what he was doing with Dario Saric alone. Just being a functional, big man who could roll and catch and make a layup. And it just looked better. I thought Kuminga looked nice in his minutes next to Chris Paul. So as much as the shot wasn't falling, I like the aggression with which he took those three-pointers. In the past, he's been a very reticent three-point shooter. He's not this kind of guy who just catches it, fires it, unconsciously. And so I thought some of that stuff was really encouraging stuff from Chris Paul. He looked pretty spry to me, way more so than he did in the playoffs last year. And so I was encouraged by this because I know it like the vision of how they want to use him became very crystal clear last night. And it seemed to make sense. And so I don't know. I came out of the Chris Paul thing pretty positive overall.
Yeah, once you see the contours of some of these lineups he's going to be involved in, it's like, oh yeah, this makes total sense. Like there was a group out there, there was Chris, Gary Payton, Clay, Jonathan Kuminga, and Kevon Looney. And it's like, that's a tough lineup, right? That is a tough lineup that can do a lot of different things, that has enough offense to sustain, that can be pretty like competitive defensively. And they, that lineup saw very minimal time, but was part of that third quarter run where the Warriors were closing the gap, where they were kind of going on their spurt. I think there's going to be a lot of combinations like that because Chris can help guys like Jonathan Kuminga. Moses Moody had an incredible game playing with all sorts of players.
Moody got to get more tick.
I think he definitely does. Like this might have been some of the best team defense I've seen him play so far. Like reading the game really well, getting deflections, rotating in terms of like showing and help. Really good stuff from Moses Moody. But good Lord, the second unit, somebody has to finish a single shot in the paint. Like I don't know the shooting numbers for Saric and Gary Payton and to some extent Kuminga on like shots within 5 feet in this game. I just don't want that kind of negativity in my day. But it was brutal. Those guys could not finish. And Chris and other mechanisms of the offense were getting good looks for them. If those shots start to go, or they're just the actions are a little bit cleaner, a little less cluttered in terms of the number of defenders are in the paint, that stuff could really, really help them. Like you can see the bones of something that could really work here. It's just not quite there yet.
Yeah, I think Chris makes a lot of sense as kind of a caretaker for the second unit. He looked pretty good. He had that one move where he basically drove past Nurkic, who didn't have a particularly great defensive game, especially in the second half, where he didn't really hesitate in order to get by him. It was more he just like slow leaned and then just spurred by him, which was interesting.
A 38-year-old point guard just cooked him. Blew right by him.
But he clearly, his organizational skills, his mastery of logistics is definitely going to be an impact for some of the younger guys. I think I'm just a little worried, a little like concerned Trolley that like it does create almost two separate environments where it's like Chris has his time and then Steph has his time. And it seemed like Curry was a little perturbed throughout and he was in foul trouble, and so that probably was a big part of it. Didn't seem to love the elongated break he had while Chris Paul had his Bosh time essentially, and then late in the game where Chris Paul just jacked those threes and missed, and then Curry got an offense. The ball ultimately got back to him, and he made it. It kind of like the aura was kind of like, yeah, I do this shit. Like, can you just let me do this? And so maybe they'll figure that out, but clearly there's still stuff maybe to figure out.
I just didn't think it was that confrontational. Like, I saw stuff from Chris too, where it was very first game of the season, I'm overpassing to try to make everybody happy, to try to make friends with this new team. And Steph, I agree, he was in a weird rhythm, like dominant at points in this game. Obviously, he's going to be effective. He's Steph Curry. Maybe it was the foul trouble. Maybe it was the rotation. Maybe it's getting used to a new roster. But like, he had some turnovers in this game, some awful passes that were just miserable, even by Steph Curry standards.
Maybe it was having to play with Corey Joseph, which I'm a Corey Joseph guy, but like playing him and Steph at the same time, I don't know what that is or why that is. That doesn't make that much sense to me. But, again, it seemed like first game jitters. I thought another thing to be, not to get too concerned, Trolley, Looney, I was getting flashbacks of the second round of the playoffs. Why at times Kerr, who absolutely loves Kevon Looney, had to pull him at certain points because the offense just got so bogged down while he was out there, right? Looney's definitely a fan favorite, but man, the stone hands and the just inability to finish 2 feet from the basket, it gets a little frustrating at points.
Do you think he was just nervous playing against Nurkic?
It's intimidating.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of the Nurkic debut, because on the one hand, like, he had a good start to the game, and you definitely saw the thinking probably that went into the trade, that like maybe an addition by subtraction just makes sense of this team a little bit more than having to constantly deal with the dominating experience, where it's like the ease of use. He's going to muck things up in the paint. He's a big old Sasquatch, just able to exert a certain physicality into the paint. And it's just like, okay, I can kind of get it. Definitely fell apart in the second half. The Chris Paul play I referenced, probably the most prominent in my mind, that I probably won't be able to forget for a couple weeks now. But like, in the last play of the game, Devin Booker found him on the roll. He has the hands and the ability to score on the roll. And that was like, that's enough. And so, Rob, where'd you end up with Nurkic?
Like, that play alone is a huge, huge play for the Suns. The fact that when Devin Booker gets trapped on a crunch time possession, you're dumping it to Nurkic at the elbow or a little above on the roll, and he's going in, finishing really cleanly, really impressively. Like, those are shots that I don't know that Nurkic is always going to make, but he delivered in a big moment in this one. And I thought he had enough big moments, right? He had enough of these times where he's showing up offensively or defensively in the ways that they need. He wasn't good defending in space. He obviously wasn't good contesting out to the perimeter, but he got some blocks. He got some challenges inside. He was big in ways that they needed him to be big. And frankly, the Warriors were sloppy offensively, but I thought the Suns did enough to kind of like muck things up for them overall, whether it was just like crowding the lane whenever it was that they tried to drive, or just getting like enough in the way. Obviously, being a presence on the boards on both sides of the ball was really important for Phoenix. I think it's a decent first look at the Suns overall. They have a lot of stuff to clean up for themselves, and I think we can get into some of that, and a lot of it connects to just like not having Beal out there and what that does to the rotation, but some positive signs for how devastating Phoenix could ultimately be.
Devin Booker last night, obviously, I've ever since not even the playoffs last year, sort of the second half of the season last year into the playoffs, he just looked like an MVP caliber player. And at points in the postseason, he just looked absolutely sublime as just both a scorer, just controlling the game, making the right reads when he had to. His transition, the fact that he was just pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and attacking with that level of consistency and ferocity. Of course, he ended up making the key passes at the end of the game where Golden State, I think, quite smartly decided Okogie would be the guy that they would help off of. And Booker just made the right reads. His ability to just be absolutely dynamite in the one-on-one, and when you're sending extra defenders, extra help, his, finding the creases, finding the openings, he's just a bona fide superstar. There's no other way to put it. On a night that KD, he didn't look like the Slim Reaper or the Servant or whatever nickname we were coming up with, KD. He just didn't look like himself last night, and Booker just took the challenge and took it himself.